am Cherlyn O'Brien, and on behalf of Central United Methodist Church, we extend a warm welcome to all of you today. We are happy to have you here for this interfaith gathering. When you came in, you were given a card, a 3x5 card, and that is for you to write any questions on during the speakers, and they will be collected so that you will have answers for them. If you didn't get one, please raise your hand and someone will bring one to you. After the speakers' presentations and the question and answer period, you are all invited to a reception downstairs. This will be a chance for fellowship, to meet and greet each other, and we hope that you all can make it down. There are restrooms outside of either doors that you entered. You go down the steps, and there are restrooms. The ones on your right, you go all the way to the end of the hall and take a left. If you go to the left out here, they are down at the bottom it's down at the bottom of the stairs. So, we welcome all of you, and I would like to introduce the Interfaith Committee, Debbie Thorpe, Dolly Chergowski, and Sweeba a third.
I also want to say thank you for coming, and I have notes written, but I'm going to try to do it without it. What Dolly and Sweeba and I are talking about is kind of the origin story for our journey to this point right here. And we all have friendship circles, every one of us, mostly people who are like ourselves that we feel comfortable with and we can deal with at any time. One of my comfort groups is definitely the Soup and Sandwich Free Lunch Program at my church, All Saints Episcopal Church. One of the things about that program, though, is we always need volunteers. Hint, hint. And that's kind of how Sweeba and I met. Sweeba came to volunteer one Saturday, and in life, if you're lucky, you form a relationship with somebody just like that. You know, it's like instant bonding. And that's kind of the way I feel Sweeba and I started out. Even though we are entirely different people, we come from different faith communities and from different backgrounds, we bonded right away. And we became friends right away. And we've shared so much of our faith and our backgrounds and our family lives. And just wonderful to be with her. Then, one day, Sweeba challenged me to bring some of my friendship group to her mosque for a women's teaching day. I don't think that's exactly what they call it, but that's what it is. And in that challenge, I introduced Dolly, who is my neighbor and a very, very good friend. And between she and I, we challenged some of our other friends to come to the mosque. And it was a wonderful day. We spent an hour learning, and then we went downstairs for the most wonderful meal. You cannot believe. And then we had fellowship. We just all mixed in both groups together, and that was supposed to last about an hour, and I think it lasted a whole lot longer than that because we enjoyed each other's company, each other's friendship, and got to know each other at a different level. So next I'm going to introduce Dolly for her part in this.
Well, at that point, Debbie passed the baton to me, and I thought, surely I have friends who would like to meet the other. And I started talking it up in our church. That spring, we had an interfaith program where we had a rabbi come, a Hindu, what else did we had the imam come. We had several different religions come. And a Father John needed somebody from the mosque, and I said, I got somebody. I've got a friend. And so Sweeba said, surely the imam would do this. And he did. He came and talked to us. Following that, before that, I missed a spot. I'm sorry, I'm not with it quite today. But Debbie asked me if I would be willing to come to the mosque, to the group where they're doing the celebration of Muhammad. And I said yes, and I gathered some friends from my church and some other friends to come to the occasion. And as Debbie said, it was enlightening to see how others worship God, to see that our way is not the only way. It's the way we are in, but it is not the only way. And to see their devotion and their piety and their culture was an eye-opener for me. And it was an eye-opener for the people that I brought with me. And from there, the group was introduced to a Methodist church in Newark Valley, and 𝙈𝙗𝙗 was welcomed out there to give a talk to a group of people, and now it's out there someplace. But we had to start someplace. We all had the common goal of knowing about the other and knowing that we are not alone in our search for God. We are not alone in finding our origins. Okay, 𝙈𝙗𝙗.
Hello, everyone, once again. Thank you so much for coming. All of us really appreciate you being here today. Picking up after Debbie and Dolly, the three of us brainstormed how we could best coming our interests and skills together to make a difference in our community. So we began different passion projects such as blood drives and interfaith event. We have successfully completed a number of blood drives, and this is our second interfaith that builds on our collaborative efforts from the past. So thank you for supporting us and our mission to foster peace and love between our community. We hope you find this event enjoyable, informative, and inspiring. Thank you so much.
At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for the afternoon. The first is Reverend Dr. Michelle 𝙀𝙁-𝙀𝙗. She is an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, beginning her 6th year here at Central. She has served congregations all over eastern New York, including the Albany and Saratoga Springs area. She has previously worked toward interfaith understanding in other areas of the state. She is a trained spiritual director, a certified lead trainer for transitional and intentional interim ministers, and has served in many positions on the district, conference, jurisdictional, and church levels, with emphasis on justice ministries. Much of her work beyond the local congregation has been focused on congregational and clergy development, particularly on clergy women. Pastor Michelle is a native of nowhere, being an Air Force child, but calls Montgomery, Alabama her hometown by virtue of long-term family and school ties there. She attended Huntington College in Montgomery and then the SUNY School of Information Sciences and Technology in Albany, where she earned a master's degree in library science. She began a career in academic library administration prior to receiving a call to ministry. She attended seminary at Drew Theological School in Madison, New Jersey, earning a Master of Divinity degree in 1999. In 2019, she earned the Doctorate of Ministry degree also from Drew. Pastor Michelle is married to Nate Trost, and their 2 children are Rachel Ruller and Jacob Trost, who are 26 and 25 years old. Out on their own, living functional adult lives. Rachel in the Albany area and Jake in the Oneonta area. Michelle and Nate live with Nate's mother, Alice, just next door. Our next speaker is Rabbi Barbara Goldman Wartell. She is in her 12th year serving as the rabbi of Temple Concord in Binghamton. She has served several other congregations in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and California, and worked for Jewish federations and Jewish community centers in Jewish family education, Jewish education, Holocaust education, and awareness and community relations. In addition, she is chair of the Children of Abraham of the Southern Tier Planning Group, has served on the board of the Institute for Jewish-Christian Understanding at Muhlenberg College, is on the board of the NAACP and the Southern Tier AIDS Program. She has continued her work locally, working to build coalitions and foster understanding and joint endeavors. Rabbi Barbara was born in Aurora, Illinois, one of 4 sisters. She was involved in Jewish summer camps and youth groups growing up. She raised her family in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Her son works for Camp Chai, the Chicago Jewish Community Center's camp in Wisconsin. Her daughter is a nurse manager at a hospital in Florida. Rabbi Barbara attended the University of Illinois and the University of Maryland, Baltimore Hebrew College, Hebrew Union College Institute of Religion, where she earned her BSW, MSW, 2 other master's degrees in rabbinic ordination. She has also done specialized training in hospital chaplaincy and interim ministry work. Imam Aden Ahmed is a graduate of Ahmadiyya Islamic University of Toronto, Canada. He completed his 7 years theological degree in 2010. Since then, he has served the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Canada, East Africa, Mexico, and is currently serving as the Imam of upstate New York for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He regularly gives lectures on Islam at various places. He is a great promoter of interfaith dialogue, and I am happy to present them now.
So the 3 of us were given the brief to talk about peace and acceptance in our own faith tradition. And then they made me go first. It is impossible. Let me just say this at the very beginning, and they're going to put us up on the screens too, so if you can't see me now, you will, bigger than I ever want to be. It is absolutely impossible to speak for all Christians. I want to say that at the very, very beginning. I can't speak, for example, for the far right of Christianity. I can't speak for fundamentalists or Pentecostal Christians or conservative evangelical Christians. I can't speak for the United Methodist Church or for every United Methodist Church member. I can't even speak for every member of this congregation at Central. Right? They're looking at me. What I can speak about is my own understanding as a faithful Christian who has progressive beliefs, who stands in opposition to some of the policies of even my own denomination. A Christian who desires peace between all people, even through disagreement or difference. You might get an entirely different answer about peace and acceptance through a Christian lens from an entirely different Christian. I just want to make that very, very clear. But here's what I think. A Christian understanding of peace has to take into account Jesus' heritage as an itinerant Jewish rabbi in what we now know as Israel and Palestine. One of the names of Jesus that we use in the Christian tradition is taken from the Hebrew prophet Isaiah. We call Jesus the Prince of Peace, mostly at Advent and Christmas time. And so we have to have a knowledge of the Jewish understanding of peace, which I'm sure Rabbi Barbara will talk about in a few minutes. So I don't want to step too far into that. But there is an understanding across most of Christianity that when Jesus speaks of peace, he's doing so from an entirely Jewish context. With that in mind, the word we understand as peace in a Christian context comes both from the Hebrew understanding of peace as shalom as healing, restoration, wholeness, as well as a Greek understanding of peace as 𝑒irene, security, prosperity, harmony. Both those ideas of peace influenced Jesus in his context because he lived in a Jewish world heavily influenced by Greek culture. His words come to us through Greek-speaking authors, some of whom are very removed from his Hebrew and Aramaic roots. His words, then, are translated by countless more who are even more removed from Jesus' roots. So an ancient Christian understanding of the concept of peace depends entirely on who is speaking. Paul, the Apostle Paul, in most of the letters of the New Testament, is that who we're listening to? He's a thoroughly Greek Jew. Or the gospel authors who come long after Paul. Everyone progressively more Greek influenced. Is that who we're listening to when we talk about Jesus and peace? Or later translators and editors and redactors of Jesus' word. Is that who we listen to? Because they're even more removed from Jewish or Greek roots and Jesus himself. So I think the further we get away from Jesus, the further we get from what he might have meant by peace. We have to mine the texts and listen to the tradition and seek to hear his voice through all of it. Because everyone who repeats Jesus' words adds their own something to them. Even the gospel authors, who we rely on the most. All of that said, I think when Jesus talks of peace, and that's who I have to listen to as a Christian, he's doing so alongside his teachings about the kingdom of God. What he meant by that, Christians also fight over quite regularly. My reading of Jesus, though, sees him talking about the kingdom of God as peace. In other words, a recreation of the world as God created it to be, whole and restored. So when Jesus offers peace, I think he means peace in that way. Peace that's not détente. Peace that is not fluffy. Peace that doesn't just live on the surface, but deep, abiding, restorative peace that recreates the world, that recreates the original divine harmony. And that means that the Christian practice of peace has to be the same. Peace in that understanding is deeply relational. Peace is not peace when it exists only on the surface or when it's procured by violence or when it's merely a standoff of equal powers capable of mutually assured destruction. I grew up as an Air Force child in the 80s. Think about that for a minute. My father was in Strategic Air Command. My father flew B-52s full of nuclear warheads. We knew as kids, tiny children, we knew that what the politicians and the culture talked about as peace really meant nothing, because we knew that if the red buttons were hit and the bombs started flying, we would go first. Peace means something different when you live with that reality that mutually assured destruction is not peace. There can also be no peace where there is resentment or recrimination. There can be no peace when the participants are unequal or not present at all. We can't impose peace. We can't make peace on behalf of someone or for someone who's not at the table. We can't make peace when some participants in the process have power and some do not, because peace is relational. True peace can only be entered into, it cannot be enforced. That's why genuine peace, lasting peace, is so hard. it's work. It's more than signing an agreement or writing a treaty or creating a law or even entering a covenant. Peace that restores God's harmony takes work. Intentional, honest, sometimes insanely hard work. It takes the work of knowing the other, entering into relationship with the other, friend or enemy. One of Jesus' hardest teachings is love your enemy. Peace takes the work of knowing the other, accepting the other, accepting each person as valuable, and creating peace together. And sometimes that's the work of a lifetime. And sometimes we don't see the fruit of it. So in my understanding of the Christian understanding of peace, I think the task for everyone who claims Christ's name, who lives his way and wants to be a follower of Christ, the task for each one is to be an agent of the peace that Jesus offers us as the anointed one of God, as the Christ, in our understanding. His last act with his disciples was to offer them this kind of peace. Not the peace that the world gives, he said, but true peace, the peace of God. The Apostle Paul would later call it the peace that passes all understanding. To the disciples after his death and his resurrection appearances, he offered peace. The first thing he offers to a fearful group of people is his peace. And he, in that act, recreates them from fearful followers into the beginning of the church through that breathing of peace. The Christian call is not to let Jesus be the once and only bringer of peace, but to take on discipleship and to do that saving, healing, restoring work of peace he did. And we say that a lot, and we don't do it as often as we say it. You can look there's a red bound book hymnal in the pew in front of you. And if you turn to page, I'm not going to make you sing, don't worry. Page 431. We sing this a lot, and people cry a lot when we sing it. It's Let There Be, I should get. Every time we put this into a service or we sing it or we have it in an event, people cry. Because it's a powerful word. It's a powerful statement of the task of the Christian. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Thank you.
We've sung Let There Be Peace on Earth many times. I don't know that it's only been in interfaith gatherings, though, so I think that it is understood more broadly as well. And, when you started to say, I thought, well, maybe it's the one I know. But and I don't know a lot of hymns, but I've learned. I'm thankful that I learned how to read music as a kid, because when I was in a CPE residency program at Lutheran General Hospital, I could follow the hymns, and because I could read the music. And our books do not include the music in them in our pews, and so you learn it by ear. You have the words there, but we don't have the music in front of everyone. So thank you. So thank you for inviting me to be here. Since we don't have a lot of Jewish congregations in the area, our members come from throughout the whole region. So my congregation is actually in Binghamton, but I do have members in this area as well. So I wanted to start with the word shalom. And the word shalom is peace, but we also use it to say hello and goodbye. And so peace is something always on our mind. And And in Hebrew, I believe as in Arabic, we have 3 root letters that form the whole language. And so when I say Shalom Aleichem, in Arabic it's Salam Aleikum, correct? And so we say the same greeting, peace be to you, as part of our greeting of one another. And in the response, we usually switch the order. So I say Shalom Aleichem, you say Alechem Shalom. And I think it's the same thing in Arabic, because we are very interrelated, interconnected, and our roots are very interconnected as well. I mean, all of our roots are, but in the linguistic part of Arabic and Hebrew, it's very strong as well. So from those same 3 root letters is the word shleimut, which is wholeness and completeness. So when we talk about peace, that's inner peace, it's peace with others around us, and peace with the world, and I would say peace with God, as we understand God, and we may all understand God differently, but we're striving for that kind of peace. So the Bible teaches us that we were created in the image of God, and it is that same God, it's just that we experience and understand God in different ways, and may call God different names, but it's all the same God. So since we are all created in God's image, we're commanded to treat every person with respect and dignity. And that means that every person has a worth as well, because God doesn't make junk, right? And so in our imperfections, we are created in God's image as well. And so that leads to many different important pieces. So this includes those people with whom we may disagree on many matters. We're all created in God's image. We all should be treating one another with respect and dignity, even if someone may not be treating us that way, and even if we have a hard time figuring out where is that common ground that we have with each other. We all deserve that treatment and should be giving that treatment to everyone as well. So we can learn from one another, and we can be the richer for learning about the different perspectives and traditions along with our own as well. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to understand our own religious traditions, and then we can say, we have so much to learn, how can we learn anything else? We can be learning about others the same time as we are learning more about our own. I do believe that. So Leviticus 19 is the holiness code, and it's in the middle of the whole Torah. So the first 5 books of the Bible we call the Torah, and we have it in a scroll, and it's on 2 poles, and it's rolled together. The middle of it is where Leviticus 19 is. So if we understand how books used to be written, the center of the page, at least in the Jewish text of biblical text and Talmud, the core text is in the center of the page, and commentaries are written around it. So if the page were to fray, the center part will be the part that will last the longest. And so Leviticus 19 we call the holiness code, because it says, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. It tells us what does that mean, and it describes it in how we are to treat one another. And so, since we are created in God's image, I would say our work is to lift up the holiness in each person. And we are told to remove stumbling blocks from the blind, and we are to remove other obstacles that could make life harder for people and makes things more challenging for them. And it culminates in Leviticus 19:18 in the golden rule in the original form, which is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. So you may know it as do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The other Jewish formulation is what is hateful to you, do not do to others. But the core is love your neighbor as yourself. In our world today, I would posit that that's the hardcore piece. It's hard to be the core piece because we know a lot of people who struggle to love themselves. And so that feeling whole with yourself is an important piece as well. So I do believe that the fact that we believe we're all created in the divine image, so we all have that little bit of God in us, that's the piece I think that can inform us more broadly on how we have to treat everyone else and strive for ways of coming together and finding common ground. So, let's see, I covered my notes there. Well, a couple of concepts that I think are important. We have a concept called pekuach nefesh, and that's the sanctity of human life. So for the sake of the preservation and the sanctity of human life, you can violate many of the other laws for saving a human life. So while some I don't do this, but for people who wouldn't drive on the Sabbath, if somebody is in a medical emergency and they have to get to a hospital, you drive and you get them there. Okay, so life-saving things and that kind of thing. So the sanctity of human life is very important. So for example, we've had organ donation for a long time, even though there might be some challenges with it, because we can save another life by sharing organs, and it preserves and it enables another person to live longer. And so things of that sort. So the sanctity of human life means every human life. And the other concept we have is called tikkun olam, and that's world repair. Understanding that the world, if we go with the Genesis understanding of the world being created in 6 days, God created the Sabbath, the day of rest, on the 7th day. God created all the raw materials and said to us, we need to move it forward and take care of it. And we get to create with all those things that we were given, so medical technology, all these kinds of things. But there's a lot of brokenness in our world too, and so our obligation is to repair the things that are broken. And Judaism is a sort of more this world-oriented religion. We don't know for sure what happens after we die. And so we are looking to make this world a better place, and by making this world a better place, that's how we bring about the Messianic age or the coming of the Messiah. It's in what we create here with all of us. So that's a key concept. I wanted to share some other texts, and these are texts that are not Reform movement texts. I'm a Reform rabbi. I'm sharing with you texts that are core concepts in all of Judaism. That doesn't mean people won't use them in different ways, but I want to give you some of this kind of a core to start with. So Hillel, who was one of the early rabbis, after the Bible was codified, our next level of things is called the Mishnah, and he is there a great deal. And he says, do not separate yourself from the community. So at one time, communities might have been the Jewish people here, and this group there, and that group there. Our communities, we're all together. And so not separating ourselves from community is important. For us to have communal prayer, we require there be 10 people present, depending where you are on the Jewish religious spectrum. In the Reform and the Conservative and the Reconstructionist movement, we count 10 people, 10 Jewish people. In Orthodoxy, they count 10 Jewish men. But the idea is for certain prayers and to fulfill certain obligations, you have to have other people with you to do them. So that sense of community is very important. My rabbi taught me as a little girl that every time you come to a worship service, you might not be in the place to get the most meaning out of every prayer, but we are there to participate for this fact that someone else may have one of those aha moments. And so we're helping to provide that opportunity as they are providing it for us, those moments of meaning. In the Babylonian Talmud, it tells us that all Israel is responsible for one another. So we are responsible for one another, and for many of us who want to be more broad in the universal piece of it and not just the particular, we would say all of us are responsible for one another as well, not just all of the Jewish community, but all of us. And then the next text from the Talmud, which I've learned is also in the Quran in very similar wording, is one who destroys a life destroys the whole world, and one who saves a life, it is as if you've saved the whole world. So that is a core piece, and you can say it in Arab. I can't say it in the other languages, but I'm just going to say it in English. But when I was doing this quite a number of years ago and learned that we have the same text, that same concept in both traditions, that is, again, about the sanctity of every human life and our obligation to try to find ways to, again, save life and not destroy lives. This is our beginning of, it's our holy season, so next Sunday night is Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of our new year. So according to Jewish tradition, the new year will be the year 5780. So according to Jewish tradition, it is 5,780 years since the world was created, or some say since people were created on the sixth day, however you want to count the days. We don't know how long a day was, whatever. Anyway, we count Jewish time in a universal sense. It's not anything about just Jews, it's about the whole world and the world we live in. So I think that's interesting. That doesn't mean that those numbers are any more the numbers to be than any others. So I live in two worlds, two time frames, two calendars. So the Jewish calendar is the same every year. It just floats a little bit. So this year it's September 29. Some years it's been right after Labor Day that we welcome the new year, and we have a month of holidays. But in this period of time for the month prior to Rosh Hashanah and all the way through, we go through a process of teshuvah. Often translated repentance, return might be better, where we see that we are not sinners, we are people who make mistakes, and so we sometimes make poor choices, and we have self-determination, and we can have this choice to be able to make good or bad choices. But this is the time of year when we look at what we've done, and we sort of look inside of ourselves, and we look at what we may have done that might have hurt others. And we try to find ways to apologize, to go to them, to ask their forgiveness. And then we also resolve not to repeat those same mistakes again. So if the same situation were to arise, that we wouldn't do the same thing over and over again. And people come to us to ask forgiveness. That apologizing is one piece. Sometimes the forgiving others is even harder. There is a tradition in the part of this that if you go to someone and ask their forgiveness 3 times and they do not accept your apology, then that is on them. It's not on you. So in this whole process of acknowledging mistakes we've made and asking forgiveness for those who've hurt and wronged, then we can ask God for forgiveness. And only after we've worked amongst one another. So that's the backdrop of this holiday season for us, through to Yom Kippur, which is our fast day, which is 10 days later. So our holidays start in the evening and go to the next day because you always knew when sundown was. And so our Sabbath is Friday night to Saturday, sundown to sundown. We keep our service the same time all the year round, so we aren't absolute about the sundown time, but it's Friday evening to Saturday evening. And so our holidays will start in the evening. So Rosh Hashanah will start next Sunday night and go through Monday. And for some, they observe it 2 days, and it goes through Tuesday as well. So I want to give you that piece as well. Another text that I find particularly helpful, and it's also from the Mishnah, from a section called Pirkei Avot, which is called Ethics of the Fathers, or Ethics of Our Ancestors. It has 3 parts to it, and I'll say it more than once because I find it a really helpful tool for myself and with others. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? When I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So, I can share that with you to unpack it in the exploration later, but again, and I think it's helpful to how to keep ourselves on track with what we need to do. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, no one else will. And but if we only take care of ourselves and no one else, what's that about? And we can make all kinds of excuses, but we need to be doing the work we need to do now on more than one front at the same time. So the wording again is, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? When I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So I have done a lot of work in trying to look at bringing people together and finding ways to have discourse with people with whom you don't agree, and how to find ways to work through, to hear one another, to listen, not just learning about different belief systems, but people where you really disagree and how to work on constructive conflict. But there's a concept about peace in Jewish tradition, which I think will be helpful, and it goes back to Aaron. So the concept is a rodef shalom. It's someone who chases after peace. And so in the book of Psalms, it says, "Seek peace and pursue it." And this verse is explained in a midrash later on that Rabbi Yochanan explained that the text teaches that to have peace, one should be like a captain on a boat. A person should always be on the lookout for an opportunity and then pursue a course toward peace. So it's a very activist understanding of peace. So the Jewish tradition teaches that peacemaking is a way of life, and it has to do with the way we treat each other every day. There's one description of a person who is a Rodef Shalom, a pursuer of peace, is this: a peace-loving person is by no means a weakling or a coward. He or she is prepared to speak out against injustice, indeed to become angry when encountering evil in others. But even in his or her anger, she looks upon her opponent as a potential friend who will eventually change his or her ways and appreciate the effort that is being made to help him or her. So Judaism believes that a person should be a Rodef Shalom, a pursuer of peace, someone who does more than avoid fighting and avoiding conflict, but who actively pursues peace. And Aaron is usually given as the model of the one who pursues peace. And it is said, the tradition is that he said to two who were not getting along, you know, this person really wants to resolve things with you, please come together. And the other one, he says it to the other one too, when they hadn't said it, which we've seen all kinds of situation TV shows that's disastrous. So there's some risk involved, but how do you bring people together in an active way to try to help to resolve things? So those are the pieces that I wanted to share. I mean, I have some different kind of prayer kinds of pieces, but I don't think that is as critical. I was at a program earlier today honoring 𝘼𝙗 Auerbach, who just retired as the director of the Jewish Federation, which is an organization for this whole area. And she closed with a story that at a conference she was at, the speaker asked, what is the most important event in history? And I believe history is in a broad sense here, because people came up with many thoughts about what was the most important event. And many of them could be plausible, and if I asked you, would come up with many as well. But the answer this speaker gave, that it was when Abraham embraced Ishmael. So the idea that we have to care for one another, embrace one another, and make those connections, as you began, it's about relationships. And once we have that sense of knowing one another, or having a sense that we can trust being able to get to know one another, then we can learn about the things that are a little bit different and figure out how we can work through those, how we can appreciate them, and learn about them, even as they may be different than how we see something or the practices that we have. Thank you.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Would it be okay if I go there? I'm kind of used to seeing the audience, so probably go there. And part of the reason I had my speech with me, so that's why. In the Islamic religion, we start our formal addresses by praising God Almighty and seeking His blessings and mercy. And I will do that, and then I will start my presentation. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers as well as members of this church for giving us the opportunity to sit together and talk about things that are very close to our heart, that is peace. Most of you will agree that we are passing through a period in our history which makes it very important for us to learn about each other's beliefs and practices and culture and religion to form a better society and to establish peace and justice in the world we live in. As you're aware that the topic of this afternoon's theme or this event is peace and acceptance, or in other words, peace and interfaith harmony. The word Islam in Arabic, as Rabbi was talking about, means peace, and that is why our greeting, which we say on day-to-day basis, is Assalamu alaikum. That's the Arabic word of it, that peace be upon you. So this way we send peace on everyone who we meet and greet. Similarly, one of the attributes of God mentioned in the Holy Quran is As-Salam, which means the source of peace, the fountainhead of peace. So all kind of peace comes from God Almighty. So if we want that peace should be established in this world, then we need to make peace with God. So I believe because peace is coming from Him, it is important that we stay connected with Him. And our relationship cannot be based on mere words, but it must be proved through our actions. If we are thirsty and there is a fountain of water in front of us, that will not quench our thirst. We have to go to that fountain in order to drink water. Similarly, when we declare that God is the fountainhead of peace, merely talking about it does not help us attain peace. We must take concrete steps to establish peace. So I believe that going away from God or religion is not the solution. Coming towards God is the solution and the way to establish peace. And after making peace with God, we need to make peace in our homes. And how do we do that? By being nice and kind to each other, first and foremost to our family members, respecting and honoring our parents, then cultivating good manners into our children, then being nice and kind and caring to our spouses. If you may know, one of the leading causes of injury to women in America is domestic violence. So a person who is not kind to his wife, he cannot go out on streets and at public forums to say that let's try to establish peace. As they say that charity begins from home. So if you are not a peaceful person at home, we cannot say that you will be helpful in establishing peace. That is why Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said that the best among you is the one who is best in treatment towards his family and wife. And he said, certainly I'm best among you. So once we have established peace with God, we have established peace in our homes, then we can move to our neighborhoods, our societies, our nation, and the world at large. Another way to establish peace is through justice. The Islamic holy book is filled with the commandments and teaching which talks about peace and justice for all people. And in relation to establishing justice, the Holy Quran says in chapter 5, verse 9, that, O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity, and let not a people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. So if we can establish justice in our society, that is a step towards establishing a peaceful society. Since we have gathered here, most of us as representatives of various faiths, so speaking from that perspective, we can establish peace by understanding each other's differences, even if we don't agree with them. But if we start attacking the beliefs and practices of other people, then naturally they in return will speak ill of our beliefs and practices. And the Holy Quran acknowledges these differences and gives us guidance in the following verse. And I quote from chapter 6, verse 109, that revile not those whom they call upon beside God, lest they, out of spite, revile Allah in their ignorance. Thus, unto every people have we caused their doing to seem fair. Then unto their Lord is their return, and He will inform them of what they used to do. So here the statement, thus unto every people have we caused their doing seems fair, that everybody believes that they are on the right path. So we need to respect other people's beliefs and practices. Now, let me present to you some incident from the life of the founder of Islam, who dedicated his life for the establishment of peace and justice in the society. It is unfortunate that many times you would see in some Muslim majority countries that people do not understand these teachings, and as a result of that, they're persecuting the minorities and not giving them the proper rights. But with these examples, you will learn that most of these people are not following what Prophet Muhammad taught us. So he was born in 570 Arabia, and he was at the age of 40 when he received his ministry, when, according to Islamic history, he was appointed as a prophet of God. So his relatives, friends, neighbors, and tribesmen who used to call him the most truthful and the most honest person in the entire society, suddenly they became his enemies, because he was living in a society where people mostly were pagans and they would worship many gods. So he preached the message of oneness and the unity of God. So naturally, that did not go well with them. So they started persecuting him as well as those who accepted this message. So many people were killed, many were tortured, and almost every single person in one way or another was affected because of that. So much so that once some of his disciples came to him and they said that, "O Prophet, before we accepted Islam, we were considered very respected people. And these people who are persecuting us would not dare even to raise voice against us. But now they're hurting us. So allow us to retaliate." But at that time, the person who was here to establish peace, he said, "No, I've been commanded to stay calm and exercise patience." So that continued for 13 long years. So he was made a prophet at 40. Until he reached the age of 53, this persecution continued. So much so that Muslims were forced to live in a valley where they had no connection with the rest of the people. They could not buy any food or water. And in that process, his wife as well as his uncle were killed because of lack of these basic necessities of life. So then a time came that God told him to migrate, because still he didn't want to retaliate, but he wanted to establish peace. So he, along with his disciples, moved to a town which is roughly 300 miles away from Mecca, which is known as Medina. So they started living there in peace. So that did not go well with the chiefs of Mecca as well as those people of the pagan society. So what they did was they brought an army who was 1,000 in number, and they were soldiers who were ready to take away people's life, and they were very experienced and expert in fighting. Now, this was the time when God finally commanded Muhammad that you have tried everything to establish peace in the society. Now they are all out to kill you, and you have the right to defend yourself. At that time, the very first verse which was revealed, which gave Muslims permission to fight back, is mentioned in chapter 22 of the Holy Quran and verses verses 40 to 41, and I read the translation of that the permission to fight is given to those who were wronged and those who have been driven out from their homes unjustly because they said, "Our Lord is Allah." And if Allah did not repel some men by means of others, there would surely have been pulled down clusters and churches and synagogues and mosques wherein the name of Allah is oft commemorated. And Allah will surely help one who helps him. Allah is indeed powerful and mighty. Look at the beautiful teaching, that the permission to fight back is given so that religious freedom can be established. And if you have noticed, the wording is that if Allah did not repel some men by means of others, there would surely have been pulled down clusters and churches and synagogues and mosques. So mosque is mentioned right at the end, but before that, other places of worship are mentioned that you must protect and honor those places of worship. Now, this is the verse which gives Muslim permission to fight. Many a times, this along with some other verses are quoted by extremists as well as those people who are not fully aware of Islamic teaching that, look, Islam promotes violence, Islam promotes fighting. But nothing is further from truth. That's why I gave you the background of these verses, that this is what happened. If those people are all out to kill you, then you have every right to defend yourself. So sometimes these verses are quoted by extremists that, look, Quran asked us to fight those who do not accept our faith. Then Holy Quran also tells us about interfaith harmony. God commands his prophet in the following verse, and again I'm quoting from the Holy Quran, our book, so that people should not think that I'm making up these statements, but this is what the teachings of the Quran are. It's chapter 6, verse 91. God says, so before this verse, God Almighty was talking about the earlier prophets, Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Isaac and Ishmael, etc., etc. And after quoting their names and their missions, God says, "These it is whom Allah guided aright, so follow their guidance. Say, I ask not of you any reward for it. This is not but an admonition for all mankind." So if we accept that all those people were rightly guided and we are following their teaching, that is the way of establishing peace. And this verse, I believe, is the embodiment of interfaith harmony. It states that the beautiful teachings of other religion have been gathered in Islam. It's like walking through a flower garden and picking the most beautiful flowers to make a most perfect bouquet. So when Prophet Muhammad, now he has migrated from Mecca to Medina, and there were other people living, people of different faiths. Again, they were pagans. There were a big community of Jews living there and some Christians as well. So so they chose Muhammad as to be the de facto ruler of Medina because he had a big community who had already accepted him. So that's why he moved to that hometown, to that town. So there he created the first charter of rights wherein each group reserved their rights and had their responsibilities outlined. So instead of judging them from his own book, which was being revealed at him, if a case would come, being the ruler of that town, if a Jewish person would come, that he would not judge him by the Quran, but he would say that, okay, I'll judge you according to your law, which is the Torah. And similarly, for the pagans, they had the choice of either being judged by the Islamic law or the Jewish law or through a worldly or secular law, which they felt was right. He even would have discussion with the religious leaders of different groups. Once a delegation from Najran, the Christian delegation, came, and they had a lengthy discussion. So it so happened that it was time for their worship, worship for the Christian delegation. So they were having this discussion in the mosque of the Prophet. So they said that Prophet felt that they were a bit hesitant. They wanted to go out. So he said, what's the matter? They said, it's time for our worship, and we need to find a suitable place where we can perform our worship. So Prophet said, no, this is also the house of God. You can pray here, you can worship here, and I have no issues with that. Similarly, he would tell his companions that do not hurt the sentiments of other people. This is how you establish peace and acceptance and interfaith harmony. So sometime, people, his own followers would say that Prophet Muhammad is the most superior prophet among the lineage or in the line of prophets. And the Jewish tribes who are living there, they would say, no, Moses is the most superior prophet. So once a Muslim and a Jewish person had an argument on this very statement that who is superior. So Muslims can be short-tempered at times, so he slapped the Jewish guy. So he came to the Prophet and he said that this is what your follower did to me. And he apologized and he said that do not give me any preference over Moses. We are just brothers. He was also a prophet of God, and I am also a prophet of God. One day he was sitting with his companions, and he saw a funeral procession. A funeral was passing by. So he stood up to pay his respect. So his disciples said that, Prophet, perhaps you are mistaken. This is not the funeral of any Muslim. This is the funeral of a Jew. So he said, was he not a human being? So this is how he trained his followers that everyone must be respected. If people sought, he would give protection. A very famous and historic letter was sent to the St. Catherine Monastery. When they came under the Islamic rule, that guarantee was given to them. And I sincerely believe that even if Muslim countries all over the world, if they just follow this letter, the statement of Prophet Muhammad, then they will never hurt any person in their country, or the minorities will not be persecuted, and innocent civilians will not lose their life. And I quote from that letter which was sent to St. Catherine Monastery. It reads, "This is a message from Muhammad, son of Abdullah, as a covenant to those who adopt Christianity near and far. We are with them. Verily, I, the servants, the helpers, and my followers defend them, because Christians are my citizens, and by Allah, I hold out against anyone that displeases them. No compulsion is to be on them, neither are their judges to be removed from their jobs, nor their monks from their monasteries. No one is to destroy a house of their religion, to damage it, or to carry anything from it to the Muslims' houses. Should anyone take any of these, he would spoil God's covenant and disobey his prophet. Verily, they are my allies and have my secure charter against all that they hate. No one is to force them to travel or to oblige them to fight. The Muslims are to fight for them. If a female Christian is married to a Muslim, it is not to take place without her approval. She is not to be prevented from visiting her church to pray. Their churches are to be respected. They are neither to be prevented from repairing them, nor the sacredness of their covenants." Then the last statement, the last phrase was, "No one of the nation," meaning Muslims, "is to obey the covenant till the last day," the end of time. So this is covenant which should have been followed even today. But unfortunately, Muslims have forgotten this. Then another aspect of establishing peace and interfaith harmony is that we respect the founders and prophets of other nations. And here I'm going to quote a very beautiful statement of the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. He stated, "Therefore, this principle lays down the foundation of love, peace, and harmony, and supports moral values. In that we consider all those prophets true who appeared in the world, whether in India or Persia or China or any other country. God instilled their respect and grandeur in the hearts of millions and made firm the roots of their religion, which remained established for centuries. This is the principle that the Quran teaches us. In light of this principle, we honor all religious founders who fall under this description. Unfortunately, our adversaries cannot treat us this way, and they do not bear in mind the pristine and unalterable law of God, that He does not give that blessing and honor to a false prophet, that He bestows upon the true one. The religion of a false prophet does not take root and does not last long, as does the religion of a truthful prophet. Sometimes a person would rather die than hear disparaging words for their elders. If we have an objection over the teaching of a religion, we should not attack the honor of the prophet of that religion or mention him in an unseemly manner. Rather, we should object only on the current practices of that nation. We should be certain that the prophet whom God has graced with the honor of acceptance by a million, and whose acceptance has continued for centuries, is thus firmly proven to be from God. So this really tells us how can we establish peace and interfaith harmony among the different faiths so that we respect and honor the founders of other religion. So Islam is a religion which promotes interfaith dialogue, and this is an essential and important part of our teaching. That is why, again, Quran says in chapter 3, verse 65, that say, O people of the book. In the Islamic terminology, people of the book are the Jews and Christians. It says, O people of the book, come to a word equal between us and you, that we worship none except Allah, and that we associate no partner with Him, and that some of us take not others for lords beside Allah. But if they turn away, then say, bear witness that we have submitted to God. So talk about the commonalities. The concept of God exists in every single religion. So here the Quran tells us, discuss the similarities. So hence I cannot be a true Muslim until and unless I don't believe in Abraham to be my prophet, or Moses to be my prophet, or David or Solomon or Buddha or Krishna or Jesus to be my prophet. So I take great pride in saying that I am a follower of all these prophets. And according to one tradition of Prophet Muhammad, God sent 124,000 prophets for the guidance of mankind, because he was not just the God of Muslims or the Jews or the Christian, but prophets were sent in different parts of the world because he's God of everyone. But we do not have the historical records of some of those, but that does not mean that prophet did not come. So in the end, I would like to again thank the organizers, all the guests who came, and thank you for your patience and your time. And I believe that we must continue to engage each other so that our relationship continue to grow, thus help us establishing peace in our homes, in our societies, and the world at large. Thank you once again.
You all have a card. If you have a question that arose in your mind, or if on reflection right now you've got a question you'd like to ask, we're providing a way for you to do that without having to stand up and say it yourself. You can write it on a card. And I'm going to come around in a little bit and collect those cards, and we'll bring them up here, and we'll figure out how to answer them. Questions first.
I wanted to say something that you alluded to a little bit and neither of us really spoke about, and that is within our own faith communities. Everybody is not always respectful of one another, and there are those who decide that their way is the way for things to be, and anyone else who does it a little bit differently is not count the same. And it causes all of us, I think, great pain when that happens within our own faith communities. That doesn't mean that whatever we can do there, which sometimes our hands are more tied, but that it doesn't mean that stops us for engaging in the larger community at the same time. But it sort of felt like it's sort of the elephant in the room here a little bit, that, while I gave you Jewish text of the things we have, there are great differences and great tumult and arguments within the Jewish community, wherever it is in the world. Some of it you may see more in Israel, with there being the Orthodox, part of the Orthodox community is part of the established government, and so have tried to do things to restrict the religious practice of others of us who don't practice the same way that they do. And so those kinds of things exist and cause all of us discomfort and pain. And while in this community here, in the greater Broome area, our Jewish community does do things together, we give people the room to do the things differently, and we aren't openly criticizing each other. That is not the case in the larger way of things. And so while we may all have the same text that we use, there are differences. And to gloss over them seemed a little disingenuous, but as we come here as Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and look towards what we can do together, we do have to clean our own homes. We do have to, as you said, be concerned about what we do within our own families, but we also have to look at the larger one too.
Anybody? Yes, a question. Yeah. No, we'll do it here. Yeah. Okay. Any others? I'm just so glad we've just educated everybody perfectly to the rabbi and the imam. So we've had two questions. We had one question that said, what other activities do the committee plan for follow-up? To be announced is the answer.
Do you want to read the question?
You go ahead. We got where? Oh, good. Thank you. And then we have this one. Okay. Good questions. Really good questions. Others? All right, so why don't we all look at that?
Okay. Would you look at both of them?
I think the first question is both to the rabbi and myself. And the question is that what do you wish Christian would do or should they use their Christian privilege to support them and show solidarity with them? So I guess, events like these would be helpful. And we live in perhaps a Christian majority country. And, I genuinely believe that wherever you see any religious communities being persecuted, whether they are Jews or Christian or Muslims or people of any other faith, we should stand up for that community and whatever is within our means to make sure that they are given their fundamental rights. And sometime we need to reach out to our elected officials when you see, perhaps not here in the U.S., but some other country, minorities are being persecuted. So reach out to them, and that way perhaps they can put some pressure on their local government, and we can see that those minorities and communities also flourish, just like we see people can practice their religion here in the U.S.
I would say, since this is a country with a Christian majority right now, to be aware that the holiday cycle that you have and the days of the week, your Sabbath is on Sunday for most Christians. There's one group that does Saturday. My Sabbath is Friday night to Saturday. In Islam, it's not exactly called a Sabbath, but we did a program once on the days of meaning. So the day of meaning for Muslims is Friday. So in how we observe them differently, what we do to give the room so that people can be able to observe the things that they need to in the time frame that they do. And for example, when I've been involved with the conversations with planning events, what do you serve for food? Well, we have halal, we have kosher, all these different kinds of things. So when we assume everybody's going to come to a pork and oyster festival, okay, There was one down the street from a synagogue when I was in Pennsylvania, and it was on one of the Jewish holidays, and so we laughed about it a little bit because they're going to be there and we're going to be in synagogue. Beautiful, but that everybody can't always partake of everything the same way, but that we can find ways to share with one another. So we find what can we have together. So for example, I will use wine and would serve wine, but I'm not going to cook with anything with alcohol if I'm going to have people who are Muslim there and from certain Christian groups as well. And if I don't know and I don't ask, shame on me. But I've also learned as a person who keeps kosher, I can't assume you know what that means. And so if I'm going to be at your house, I need to let you know, I may not, if you're serving meat or something like that, I may or may not eat that. And, I'm not expecting you to get a crash course in all the laws of all these things, but we, I think, can give you guidance so that it's not awkward. But assuming that everyone is, for example, celebrating Christmas, and realizing that not everyone is, and there may be your neighbors who are not, and or it may be somebody in the store or whatever else. I never mind working on Christmas when I was a chaplain in the hospital. Nobody knew in the pastoral care department that anybody came dressed up as Santa Claus on Christmas Day. I was in pediatrics that time of year, and so anybody who was admitted to the hospital after everyone left for Christmas Eve, there were gifts to be given to them, and so I was supposed to give them, but there was somebody who was a Santa Claus who came, so they got to give them. So we help each other out in the ways that we can, but to be respectful of that, because I think there is, and as a Jewish person who also is a person, not a person of color, but still a minority, I have to be aware of my privilege as well that I may have, as opposed to someone else who looks different than what is considered the white whatever community here. So as we come in touch with what does that mean, and what do we do with that, and as women, I think, and as men, there are pieces there as well, that we can be more sensitive about it, and if we learn about each other, I think we will find out how are those ways we can move forward. Please.
Just to say, as someone who has lived in that Christian privileged place all my life, I think one of the things I've had to learn, and sometimes that learning has been easier than other times when it's been very hard, is for Christians to learn to check our assumptions. Absolutely check our assumptions. We think we know this thing about these people because someone here said this, then something, something, something. And we begin to build assumptions in our own minds and our own hearts based on hearsay and supposition and somebody else's opinion of things. And the easiest way to check our assumptions is to begin by asking questions. And it feels awkward sometimes, and it feels embarrassing because you feel like you should know these things. But it never hurts to ask a question as long as we are asking in a spirit of humility and peace and a desire for understanding.
We got another question coming up.
If I may add in the meantime. So remember, sometime, a little bit of sport will go a long way. When there was a talk of Muslim ban and 4 or 5 Muslim countries were, people of those countries were banned from coming to the U.S., we saw a lot of people coming to our mosque to show their support and solidarity. So sometimes these kind of acts of goodness go a long way. So, sometimes you just have to show your support to people of other cultures and other religions, and we were really very much encouraged and motivated by that these are not the sentiments of all the people, just some individuals and politicians who share these ideas. So yeah, learn about others' beliefs. So sometimes pay them a visit in their mosque or synagogues or church or whatever is closer to you. That should help.
Yeah, the next question we have here is, how do we change the dialogue in America that we are all one kind, mankind, I would say humankind, and that God is God? It's a good question. And I think, as you said before, starting with these kinds of things. The other piece is, after we're done with this, when we're not quite so formal, I think it's also when we just get to know each other a little bit one-on-one. And when we become people to each other, that's the other piece. Because all of a sudden, whatever other people might be saying out there changes. And all of a sudden, we realize, wait, that doesn't ring true with our own experience. If we don't experience people who are different than ourselves, we don't have that reference point as a first part of it. Other comments you want to make on that and things, what else can we do to change the dialogue in this country? I think our dialogues that we're having in a lot of our faith communities are very different than what's on the media. And so it feels like we're swimming upstream sometimes in talking about the common good and being concerned about the welfare of all people in the work that we are doing in, I think, most of our faith communities. And we come together with that, and when we find we're like-minded, whether it's in our houses of worship, whether it's at a protest rally, whether it's in a volunteer thing at a soup kitchen or a child pantry, we find we're doing that work together, and that's another way that makes a major change. When we roll up our sleeves together, when we have sleeves, anyway, that's another piece of it.
One of the things that I mentioned in my presentation is that same idea that it begins in relationship. And sometimes those relationships are hard to build because we just feel so different or disconnected or separated even, and to take the step, even the tiniest step toward building a relationship with someone we might never have otherwise, begins breaking down those walls, and we become humankind, not us and them. And when we do that, when we become humankind together and we live in peace together, you know, that's what Christians would call the kingdom of God. That's the glimpse of God. That's how we see God here, I think. Did you want to?
Yeah, I guess stepping out of your comfort zone sometime would help. Instead of just going to your mosque or church or synagogue, instead, you know, reach out to different people and treat everyone fairly and equally. This reminds me of a saying of Prophet Muhammad in his last official sermon at the time of Hajj or pilgrimage. He said that a white person has no superiority over a black person, nor does a black has any superiority over a white person. And Quran tells us that everyone are equal in the sight of God except those who are more righteous and God-fearing. So treat each and every person equally, and think as if you are born from the same father and mother, and teach your your friends, your relatives, your own children, because they will be the future leaders. So if we can start from our home, if we can train our children in a manner that it's not just enough to not to be racist, but you have to be anti-racist, so that you stand up for what is right, not for what the other person is thinking because of the privileges that they have.
I think another piece is to realize we all have prejudices and preconceived notions about someone or some different ones, and if we are not honest with ourselves, that we have different reactions to different people, and it may be an individual person or a group, then we can't figure out how to work through that and get to another place with it. So none of us is above having to look at that, and it doesn't matter what the color of our skin is or our gender. I think we all have to look at how we are about others. In Jewish history, particularly with the Holocaust, we talk about there were perpetrators, there were collaborators, there were victims, there were bystanders, and the other category is upstanders. And a lot of the Jewish history that we teach is that Jews were the victim. In the world today, I think we all have the potential to be any of those roles in ourselves at any given time. And if we aren't honest with ourselves, whether it's seeing small children bullying each other to some of the much larger scale things we unfortunately witness a lot of the time right now, I think we have to realize all of that potential for ourselves. And there is a lot of work with upstander training now. I'm intrigued by a woman named Valerie. I think her last name is pronounced Keur, K-E-U-R, I think. She's Sikh, and she has a program called Revolutionary Love. And it's not about love each other nice. It's about love, talking about actually the pain of childbirth and the love you go through to give birth to a child. And that with that, it's almost like pursuing peace. That's the kind of energy we have to really not only love ourselves and love those like ourselves, but love our opponents and to love everyone, because from that work, we're not doing it out of hate. We're doing this work to try to promote peace and to promote better things and getting beyond the obstacles out of love and concern and caring and out of our relationships. So that leads into my hard question here, which only sometimes gets asked, but is a very important one. To what extent is the Israel-Palestinian issue either religious or political, and how can we promote peace? So Israel, while the concept of the promised land is from the Bible, there were other people there when Abraham came, and there were other people there when Moses came back with everyone. So the fact that there is more than one group of people with a legitimate claim to the same piece of property and real estate really is the case. And, you know, they say sometimes, you know, we love our whole family. It's that first cousin we can't stand. We're relatives of each other, and it's very complex, very hard, and the years of lots of things that have happened have made it more difficult. So I don't think there's any simple answers, but the politics and everything happening in Israel, no one knows if a new government is even going to get formed now. It's a coalition government system. It looks like it has a chance. It may be a little bit better than what we've had for a while. I am a Zionist. I'm a lover of Israel. I have never been in support of the people currently in government. I'm an American. I don't vote there, okay? But there is something called the World Zionist Congress from when Zionism began with Theodor Herzl in the 1800s. And so there is a role that Jews throughout the world can have in certain aspects of things there. Not who's in the government and who's in the Knesset, but in other aspects. And so we do get a chance to sort of weigh in. There are issues in Israel with the religious Orthodox Jews trying to impose their way of doing things on all the rest of us as Jews, let alone what is happening between non-Jews. The British mandate system of government allowed that every business was supposed to be closed one day a week. So as I said, we have our different holy days. So Muslim businesses are closed on Friday, Jewish businesses on Saturday, Christian businesses on Sunday, and that has stayed. So there are some things that are good that have happened, and there are others that are very painful, and it's painful for everyone. And how do you try to pursue peace? How do you resolve things with people who want to kill you? And that is a challenge all the way around. There are a great many organizations and groups that are working to bring people together, and they can't be real out in the open because for some people to be involved in that work could be threatening to themselves and their families. But I would suggest one group to look at is called Kids for Peace, Kids with the number 4, Peace. And they've been around, I think, almost 20 years. And they start, I think, in like 4th or 5th grade, and they have groups of, and this is doing it from people of faith. So it's Muslims, Christians, and Jews from Israel or the territories who meet together in age group cohorts once a month, and their parents meet at the same time. And then if they do the whole year, then they get to go to a summer camp. A lot of them are in the United States. There may be other places in the world, and some of them, one of the older groups, it's more environmental stuff in Israel. And so they get to develop these relationships. They do, and their parents do. The people who began in this program are now adults in both communities. So again, when you build bridges and you get to know one another, it can make a difference. There are many programs like that. I don't know for sure what happened. I know I was lobbying because in Congress they were going to cut money for those kinds of programs. There was money, they were going to try to slap the hands, and cut money out of places that it should be going, including these different groups that are trying to build these bridges. And so others have stepped forward to raise the funds. So there are many things that can be done, and we can work to promote peace between ourselves here and there. And sometimes you just got to turn off the news and let's let things sort out. And the sky might be falling, but it might not be quite yet. And I have to believe, I'm an optimist, but a realistic optimist, that things will improve and will get better for everyone, but it will not be overnight.
If I may add in this, I think there's plenty of land there that two countries can exist. And whoever is the ruling party, either in Israel or elsewhere, if you are just to your people, then that's the way to move forward. As I quoted one of the verses, that the enmity of a nation should not drive you to act otherwise than justice. So if justice is served at different levels, then even if the ruling party does not belong to your faith or your political ideas, still people can coexist. So I believe that this is something which whether whichever party rules, they should treat their people with justice and kindness, and by giving them equal opportunities.
I'd like to add one other piece, and that is, if we want to be concerned about the Palestinian people, we also need to cry out for the people who've suffered in Syria and in Yemen and many other places, and the Sudan. And it doesn't matter if they're all Muslim and we aren't Muslim, it doesn't matter. We need to be concerned about all of these people. And when there are people who are in situations out of their control and they're suffering, that should cause us pain, whatever color skin they may have, whatever their faith might be. And if we only target and are interested in some and not others, we have to look at ourselves and say, wait, we need to be concerned about those other people too. Not to say we shouldn't be concerned about anyone, but we should be concerned about all. And as we're concerned about the treatment of Palestinians, some of the other treatment of some others in the region have been far worse, and none of it should be able to continue it that way. We need to be able to treat everyone better and have more opportunities for everyone.
There is one more question.
Here, I think.
Okay. How is the Ahmadiyya Muslim community different from other mainstream Muslims? So the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is different in two ways. Most of you must have heard about Sunnis and the Shias. And Ahmadis, you can say, is an offshoot of Sunni brand of Islam, but different in a sense that as all the major religions of the world are waiting for a reformer in the latter days, some call him Messiah or Mahdi or person of other faiths, but all of us will agree that we are waiting for a reformer. So the Ahmadiyya Muslim community believes that their founder Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who was born in 1835, is that reformer and second coming of Messiah, not the same Messiah, but someone having his qualities and characteristics like establishing peace and justice and being nice and kind and loving to others. This is the main difference, that Muslims are still waiting for reformer in the latter days in the name of Messiah and Mahdi. We believe that the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community was that reformer, Imam Mahdi and Messiah. And another difference is that Muslims, majority of the Muslims believe that there cannot be any more prophet after the founder of the Islam, Prophet Muhammad. We believe that this is a spiritual title, and when he called him, when Prophet Muhammad predicted this and made this prophecy that a reformer will come in the latter days, he gave them, he said that he will be a prophet as well. So we consider him to be a prophet and guide and a reformer of the latter days. But other Muslims believe that no more prophet can come after the founder of Islam. So we believe he was the last law-bearing prophet, but more can come for the guidance of Muslims. So this is the main difference between the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and mainstream Muslims.
If I'm convinced of only one thing, is that we need more of these get-togethers. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of wonder, there's a lot of fear, And I'm trying to come up with a prayer that would cover all this, but it's all too big, and it gets bigger the longer we talk. And so I'm going to just do a prayer for me. And I'm not alone here. God, give me the words to thank you for this opportunity that we've shared this time together. This has overwhelmed me with so many thoughts. I hear myself in so many of the things that our presenters have said. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. I'm not the only one who is concerned. My time is running out, and there's young people to follow us, and they must have a world of peace. They must have a world that exists. I ask you to bless all of us here and send us out as your prophets, as your disciples, to speak to other people and to act on your behalf of love, loving kindness. A word I heard when I was taking education for ministry, a Jewish word, I think, chest? Yes, and it has impressed me so much that whenever I hear it in any religion, I think of where it came from and how united we are in that wish for loving kindness and peace. We can do this, each one of us, with your help. You are the God of all of us. We have different perceptions of you because we are finite. We cannot see what we cannot see. We cannot know what we do not know. But it is there, and it is discoverable, even if it's while we're praying in the silence and the darkness of a room. It's there. We just have to reach for it. And I'm going to close because there's too much, so much. But I thank you, Lord. I thank you for all these people and these speakers and the brilliance that they have and the knowledge that they're willing to share with us. And I ask for peace, shalom. And I am not too proud to ask you to open up that music book and sing, "Let It Begin With Me." Be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God our Creator, children all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be a moment now. With every step I take, let this be my song of vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
So we invite you to be in conversation around the tables downstairs. Find someone you don't know to sit with. Have a little nibble, have a little chat. And there is an elevator if you need it, and we can certainly, Nate back there waving at you, will help you with the elevator if you need it. Thank you all for coming. Please stay for refreshments.